Yep, absolutely. So guys, today's theme is actually going to be a very specific theme. I chose this concept, which I feel like a lot of people already know, but don't quite know the details, perhaps. It's called IQP, and not just any random IQP, specifically the IQP positions that we get as white, and how to handle these positions with the weak pawn, with the isolated queen pawn. So it's actually funny that in the chess literature, IQP is sort of looked as a bad thing because it's a weakness, right? We have ourselves an isolated pawn. And a lot of the times it's also, you see that, oh, yeah, he has IQP, that's bad. I'd rather play against the IQP. So this is all sort of well known, but how to play with an isolated queen pawn, I feel like is an art in itself. And very specifically, yes, very aggressive plans and ideas I'm going to present to you, specifically from famous games. And I'm going to pick games that you might not have even heard of, that go way, way back. So throughout this presentation, I want to make it as fun as possible. So I'm going to be asking you some really cool questions in solitaire chess format, where you get to sort of put yourself into the player's shoes and try to figure it out. And then you can send me private answers in chat. Okay, so I hope everyone's going to enjoy this. And let's jump right into it. So it is playing with the IQP. So you have the bad pawn, right? Yes, so yeah, people are already asking some really good questions here. So let's start. So I'm going to present to you this game where white player is Yuri Razuvaev. Now, here's a quick question. I'm pretty certain that most of you don't even know who this grandmaster is. All right, so at least one person says I know him. Okay, you probably don't know him personally. You've heard of him. Okay, so he's one of the really, really strong Soviet grandmasters. This country, Soviet Union, actually no longer exists. It's now called Russia. But back then, he was one of the top grandmasters. He's actually more known as a coach, and he has coached Alexander Kostyuk, women's world champion. He has coached Russian grandmaster Tomaszewski, who is, over 2,700, and really, really top player in his own right. So let's jump into the game. And as we're going to be making moves, I'm going to be asking you some very specific questions. So d4, d5, c4, e6. So we get into this position, more or less many different ways to get IQP. And he specifically says, you know what? Black plays this move c5, inviting this kind of very theoretical debate. Very theoretical debate. This is called the Tarrasch, the semi-Tarrasch specifically, yes. And now pawn takes, knight takes. By the way, this knight takes d5 has recently been really, really popular. And the line that he plays actually is especially if you play this for white, this may be a really cool weapon for you guys. For example, he plays e3. I should mention that after the moves e4, knight takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes. Kramnik really popularized this method of defense for black. And even though white has this monster center, right, and seems like an advantage, it's actually not super easy to get a big edge. Black slowly neutralizes the center. And keep in mind, in the end game, you never know when this 2 against 1 may actually hurt white. Yeah, some people say it's kind of like the Grunfeld. Yeah, except in the Grunfeld, the pawn is on g6, pawn and bishop on g7. So this, you can call this the Grunfeld center too. So let's say you know your opponent loves these structures for black. They've studied at really, really high level. But you play this quiet move e3. So the first thought is, wow, white is playing so slowly, so passively. Black played in this game knight c6, bishop c4, putting pressure on the d5 knight. No major threats yet. White is just developing. Black says, haha, I've created the weakness, the IQP, and I've got the knight in front of it. That means everything that you've been taught, right, guys, Black is doing great. If the knight is in front of the IQP, that pawn can never move. Black's about to play bishop e7 castle, and he's doing great. Okay, white player says, after bishop e7, I'm okay with this position. I'm going to play castles. Black plays castles. And now he plays bishop d3. I should also mention that the more popular way to play this position is to start rook e1 these days first, and then bishop d3 later. But it's actually could transpose, so it doesn't really matter. And now, interesting decision by the black player. Knight takes c3. So here's my question for everyone. Why do you think black took on c3 and sort of slightly improved white's structure a little bit? What was black's idea? Absolutely. So yeah, so the black is trying to get the same type of pressure that we get against the hanging pawns. So this structure is only slightly improved structure. Okay? It's actually still pretty weak pawns, and black exactly wants to do what a lot of people are typing here. Black wants to play b6, that's what he played in the game. Very simple plan. Bishop b7, knight a5, rook c8. This is a beautiful bishop. You plop a knight on c4, and you slowly try to outplay white. Okay, rook e1 happens, bishop b7. And now I say this is the Tabia position that can result from many different openings, such as the Panov-Botvinnik attack, right, the Caro-Kann. Sometimes you get it also from various Queen's Gambit accepted positions. And here's the question. If it's so bad for white, like rook c8, knight a5, then why are a lot of players are playing this for white? There's a very, really important idea that everyone has to know. Okay, I see some people already may be familiar with some white ideas here. So there's a very, very powerful idea for white. Again, think about attack, right? You already have a damaged structure. Yeah. All right, so some guys are familiar. And the key move, guys, is h4. Powerful attacking concept. This is one of the first games where this move has been played. Okay, one of the first games. And what's interesting about it is since then, I'm actually surprised if we're going to look in the database, lots and lots of players, even strong grandmasters, still play these positions as black, because you're going to see how powerful white attack really is. So first, let's try to understand what happens if bishop takes h4, simply winning the pawn. It's very risky, I should say. But even this position, a lot of grandmasters sometimes enter. So very simple, right? We simply take the bishop, rook e3, and you just switch the rook over to the king side. You already got two monster bishops lined up. The rook's about to enter here or here, and black's task is very defensive-minded. For example, a lot of people play g6 to stop rook h3 idea. Rook g3, very sneaky move, guys. Of course, the idea is bishop g5. Yep. So the dark squares are extremely weak. And now I like the following sequence. Probably the simplest is to play bishop g5 first, right, to weaken him up a little bit. f6, bishop h6, hitting the rook. The rook has to go somewhere. Rook e8 is the most common one. And now I love queen h5 move. You can already see bishop takes g6 sack coming up. They have to play f5, and after rook e1, white has amazing compensation. Huge attack, right? You don't even need to calculate a lot of variations to realize how powerful white's attack is.
Can I ask one question for people?
Sure.
Why couldn't we take on g6 also?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question from Greg. Can you guys calculate a little bit what happened after rook g6? So guys, if you saw this line, pawn takes, queen takes, king h, this is all forced, right? And now the big threat is bishop g5, bishop f6 transfer. Black better have an answer for this. So think about defensive chess, right? How can we bring more defensive pieces into the game? And also one thing to keep in mind is that white is down an entire rook, right? So sometimes giving up some material, yes, giving up some material. Yeah, you guys are actually catching pretty good. So yeah, rook g8.
Oh, it's white from...
is the idea, defensive idea. Yeah, so people are catching up. Very nice. So rook g8 is, yeah, what people are saying. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, not super easy, right, to win. Bishop, yeah. So I think most of them got it.
Ooh.
So very simple.
What's the evaluation here after rook g8?
Check.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Let's see, rook g7.
Queen h6 and then...
Queen h6. You have to take the queen. What else?
Oh, yeah. You get e6.
Yeah, it's a fight. g2 is weak.
And so you're saying even though we win this material, you'd rather just keep the initiative with rook e1 at the start?
Of course, yeah. You don't want to give your opponent any counter chances, yeah. I don't know where king. f8, h8. Okay, there is queen f6. I mean, white is probably not losing, right, at all.
I mean, it looks really, I feel like it looks pretty good for white, right?
Maybe king.
Or am I overestimating?
King here, check, king g8. You have bishop c4 check. Yeah, I mean, white is still better, for sure.
Rook e1 looks good too.
Rook e1 is good.
I just thought it made sense to just look at it, that's all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, yeah. But I really like rook e1, and then the attack is basically unstoppable. Rook g6 is still a big threat. Very unpleasant position. But yeah, this is also, rook takes g6 is interesting. So guys, basically this is very unpleasant. Even, I'm surprised, if you search online this position, how many top grandmasters fall for this trap?
Ooh.
Can you see the names? Ivanchuk Sutovsky. By the way, Nicholas Cheka, he is a graduate of your program, right?
Yes, he's been.
He knows chess history really well, right?
Yeah.
So look at him. He's been doing really well with this line.
Well, he was black. Oh, he played a game with black though, if you look, and with white. So he lost in 2015, or he won with 2015 with the black side, and then the white side.
So this is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Statistic.
It's funny.
But what I'm really surprised is how many top grandmasters still allow this and play this as black. This is just, look at the statistics, 75%. Terrible. So clearly they didn't do their openings work like Greg is recommending. So let's go back a little bit and see in this game, Ivan Farago, you know, reasonable, strong grandmaster. I mean, at that point, he was 25-10. Even higher rated than Razayev. He plays knight a5. So now white obviously has a monster attack. How would you guys continue the attack? That's true, yeah. Given that the year 1979, 2500 is probably top. Probably top what? Top 50 in the world at least.
He was number 82 in the world in 1979.
82, okay.
With 25-10, yeah.
So strong players, top 100. So this is a classic game that everyone should know, because from this game, this entire line, in my opinion, you know, all the top players, like if you name any top 10 guy, Like Magnus knows this, and everyone knows this. It's basically unplayable position for black. But even to this day, you still see some players enter this. So yeah, the next move is rather obvious, right, guys? How would we continue the next move? Yeah, Cheka actually, if you look in the database, a couple of moves earlier, he actually won 2 games in a row exactly the same way. In the recent tournament too. Against, I think, 2,300 players. So the next move is rather obvious, knight g5. Okay, so black says, am I really afraid of checkmate? I just play h6. And I think most of you will know what to do next. The next move is kind of an autopilot move for a lot of attacking players. Let's give you some time to figure it out. People are not quite decided between knight h7 and queen h5. Both are really good moves. I like queen h5. That's what he played. Keeping your options a little bit more open. Knight h7 is basically coming up next, and black can't really stop it. And that's how the game continued. So black plays bishop d5, but white has a winning attack. So notice, again, in IQP-like structures, this is slightly different than typical IQP because the pawn moved to c3. If you split the board into 2 halves, usually white is losing the battle here on the queen side, right? But who cares? If you can checkmate black on the king side, that's game over. And that's what's happening here. Knight h7. And now, guys, can you finish black off here after rook e8? Pretty easy. Yeah, wow, people are like solving this easily. Well, it's a nice warm-up for first game. I think you guys already see it, right? So if the bishop takes h6 move is not natural to you, then you should really focus on your kind of improving your tactical skills, and especially don't be afraid to sacrifice pieces for attack. Here you're getting 2 pawns already. But the simple thing is count the number of attackers. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't forget the rook is coming in. And there's really not a whole lot of defenders left. 1, 2, 3. Maybe the bishop on d5 counts. I don't even know if the bishop counts as a true defender, but overwhelming attack. All right, so I want to show you how the game finished off. So black plays f5. Of course, the rook swings over to say hello. Bishop takes h4. Very simple rook g3. Bishop takes check. There's one little trick though. After the move knight f6, the big threat is of course queen h6. Okay, so bishop h2 check. What would you play as white? But do you see the correct defense for black? If king takes bishop, so king takes bishop is the logical move. How does black defend? Well, queen c7, queen g7, be careful, guys. Yes. Yeah, Ryan saw it. Yeah, so this is kind of the last trick, right? Yeah, the key is to bring the rook over. So first check, and then you bring the rook over. And once again, the 7th rank defense is key. Again, when you have extra material, don't forget you can give up some wood back. Queen h6, rook h7. So that's the kind of trick. So obviously king h1 is the easy move. And black has to part with the queen. So queen takes, check. And the rest is more or less just white finishing of the game. There's really no compensation. I mean, even though there's a rook and a knight for the queen, look how weak the king is. And now rook c8, rook h1. Simple idea is to play king g1. Check first. King g1, and black is losing the game. Queen g5, very nice little quiet move to prepare rook h8. And now he won the rook. So what did we learn from this first example? Okay, let's go back to the critical moment right out of the opening. So let me scroll back. all the way back here. This position, okay, from our research, again, let's click online. We get quite a number. Actually, the move order is important. So I'm going to make 2 more moves because we're going to get much more games. Let me click on search here. So we get a pretty big sample size here, right? White's most common move is h4. White scores 76%. Even here, you see lots and lots of strong players. I mean, you see Sutovsky, right, at the top. They still get it wrong. So clearly, knowing your classic Tabia attacking position with h4, this position is basically not playable for black. Very, very bad position. All right, so if there are no questions here, we're going to talk in detail about different other lines. So I'm going to want to show you some other games. So let me go to my next example. Next example, again, a little walk in history here. Smyslov against Ivanchuk. Both are Vasily. Interesting first, right? One is Russian, the other one's Ukrainian, but they're both Vasily. They're playing a USSR championship in 1988. Also, pretty long time ago. Now, one thing that you may not be familiar, who wants to guess how old Smyslov is when this game is played? Or approximately, let's do ballpark figure. 30s, 60s, 50s, at least 70s. Okay. I believe he's in his 60s, if I'm not, maybe 67? 67, yeah, I think he's 67. All right. And he's playing against young gun, right? Vasily Ivanchuk, rated 26-25, actually higher rated than Smyslov during the game. And, you know, he's basically like, think about this, Smyslov against, so Ivanchuk is basically like, who would it be by modern standards? Like a young, promising superstar. Maybe Firouzja, you know, somebody like that, superstar, like really, really strong player. And Smyslov, well, we don't even have anyone in their 60s who is super strong these days. But maybe like Anand, but obviously much, much older. All right, so why is this important, guys? Well, look at this game. This is just a good little historical tidbit in terms of the age. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, c5. All right, here comes very aggressive young gun. He says, who is this Smyslov guy? Yeah, used to be a world champion at one point. He's in his 60s. I want to go into super sharp Benoni, right? So d5, e takes d, c takes d, very sharp play. And then Smyslov says, you know what? I'm just going to take the game to quiet waters. E3. So you see, once again, you can steer the game in the right direction if you're white. All right, so let's see what happens next. Pawn takes, d5, knight c3. We've got ourselves classic, potentially IQP coming up. Bishop e7. In this game, pawn takes, Smyslov puts the bishop on d3 instead of bishop c4. Both are actually pretty popular, so you can play IQP different styles. Okay, bishop on d3 looks actually pretty strong too. Both have their merits though. Knight c6, logical move. Both sides castle. Rook e1, we've already seen this rook e1 move before. Bishop f6. And now, unlike the h4 plan, here white goes for a totally different plan. Okay, he plays bishop e4. The point is he's putting pressure on the knight on d5, and he's also protecting the d pawn. So what does black play? Simply knight c7. And once again, if you look online, lots and lots of games that went like this. And Ivanchuk was probably happy, right? He also read a lot of books that said, well, IQPs are bad. This pawn on d4 is a weakness. Okay, I've got my knight in front of it, therefore I should be fine. Well, but there are certain problems. White gets this huge outpost, right? This e5 outpost for the knight. This bishop is still not quite out. And of course, the attacking potential against the h7 pawn. So the next move is rather predictable, knight e5. We're not really worried about bishop takes, pawn takes. That makes our life a little bit easier. So he plays knight c6. I don't like this move. And clearly, Ivanchuk already was feeling a little uncomfortable. He played passively, maybe secretly hoping for some kind of a draw with knight going back to f3. I don't really know what he was thinking. Knight c6 is just a passive move. Obviously, black is happy if white trades. This is an interesting point. Which pawns are weaker, this pawn or these pawns? Normally, the c6 pawn is not super easy to attack, c6, a7. Usually black is going to play a5. So I would say d4, c6 pawn cancel each other out. But with every trade, and this is important to remember, with every trade, black's life is generally easier when playing against the IQP. So now the attack is not as powerful. This knight on d5 is hard to get rid of. Yes, this bishop on c8 is still passive, but maybe there's future after a5, bishop a6, and black can get some counterplay. So there's no need to do that. I should also mention that bishop d7 is how people play this position these days. They want to get rid of that bad bishop. They want to put it on c6, sometimes on e8. They're not worried about knight takes, queen takes. Also, generally speaking, when it comes to trades, you don't mind giving white two bishops, right? When you're playing against the IQP, the knights are more important. Because normally two bishops are really, really powerful in chess, and you rarely want to part with your bishop pair. In this case, you don't really care about the d7 bishop. Now, funny enough, this position happened. Ivanchuk was white against Wang Hao, Chinese player. Many, many years later, he played queen d3, h6, logical move, knight g4. Notice how white is shifting all his pieces to attack on the king side. Bishop c6 is played, queen g3, setting up some very, very obvious ideas, right? Look at the pin, knight takes h6, king h8, and now queen h3. Knight f5 is played. White has a forced win, guys, believe it or not. Chinese grandmaster Wang Hao played the most logical moves, right? Bishop d7, bishop c6, got the knight on f5. It looks like he's got a lot of defender around the king, yet he's completely lost. All right, can you find it? Again, type the message to me if you already see the win. Yeah, people really love to sacrifice here. Okay, but don't forget, you want to play the best moves for black too. Don't just walk into some, I take everything on h6 and queen h7 mate, right? So generally speaking, I see a lot of people aiming at the right ideas, but don't quite get the perfect execution of the ideas. So one thing I should say that the move that Ivanchuk played is actually a pretty strong move, but he later messed up, believe it or not. He played first move, knight takes h6. It actually wins as well, guys. But the key idea is you want to remove this very powerful defender, this knight on d5 first. Okay? Knight takes d5 is what he should have played. How many of you actually considered starting with knight takes d5? Just changing the move order a little bit. Now things are really, really tough for black. Bishop takes d5. Forced, right? There is no alternative. Bishop takes f5. Really easy to calculate. Because you were really jumping at second on h6. But this removes two defenders, two knights. And now, simple chess. Knight takes h6, and the king is exposed. Pawn takes, bishop takes, and black is busted here. So king g8, and now what? Almost there. All right, yeah, most guys already see what's happening. You already saw from the previous example, right? The rook lift. When there's a lot of clearance, the G file is open, the rook lift is a killer idea. Very important. Rook e3. And yeah, bishop h4 doesn't save. Exactly, rook g3. So it's pretty much game over. Yep. Simple chess. Well, Ivanchuk had the right idea, but again, the move order does matter. He started with knight h6, which should still win. Pawn takes. Now he should have played knight takes d5. This also wins. Takes, takes, and we get similar type of position. The only difference here, there's this bishop g5 idea, but it shouldn't really matter. We can play bishop e4 and just convert. This is just a much, I mean, there's still some work, but this is a much better position that he got in the game. So he played actually the wrong move. Bishop takes h6, thinking, of course, the same ways that you guys thinking, oh yeah, knight h6, queen h6, easy made. But sometimes, guys, you do forget a little detail. I do believe this was actually either blitz or rapid game. So, I mean, these are super strong GMs, right? And this knight h4 turned out to be not super easy. All of a sudden, black is back in the game. Ivanchuk actually ended up losing the game. So the lesson is, when you see really promising sacrifice, make sure you calculate everything precisely. Removing the knights first would win the game. Yes, Wang Kao was playing black. And as a matter of fact, I can do a quick reference for those of you. Yeah, this is the game. Ivanchuk against Wang Kao. If you want to look it up, the details of this game. So let's go back. So this is just a simple example how modern treatment with this bishop d7 is still not super easy. Ivanchuk learned his lesson back in 1988, right? That Smyslov gave him. And he played a bad move in the game. He now took the position up as white, and he got a winning position against a very strong grandmaster. But let's get back to our main game. This game is going to be slightly different, not quite as tactical. It's going to be more positional because Smyslov wants to win the game by pure positional ways. And this is kind of unusual, right? To play positional and IQP structures. Typically, we want to attack and give checkmate. So let's go through the game. Queen d3, hitting h7, so logical move h6. My question is, how would you play here as white? Not an obvious choice, I have to say. And you may even differ from Smyslov in your choice. You have more than one way. And this is, in these types of positions, really the style of a chess player, if you really love to attack more or to play more positional chess, is determined. Some people really love positional chess where you get beautiful outposts, great squares. Some people really love to attack, prepare sacrifices. All right, so people are really spotting really nice attacking ideas first. So I clearly already see the preference here. Most of you guys are true attackers. You want to checkmate the king, which is actually not a bad opening, right? IQP positions generally are attacking based. I have to say, though, Smyslov's idea was more positional. He plays unusual bishop takes d5. So we'll go back to the attacking move, but first let me show you his idea. Knight b4, queen g3, bishop h4, queen f3, and then pawn takes d5. Unusual idea, actually, but it's very positional. So let me go back. But the more aggressive move, and probably the best move, is queen h3. Very difficult to defend here as black, I have to say. We are preparing potential sacrifices, right? But you do have to do some work here. For example, knight takes d4. You are giving up a central pawn. And I'm almost certain that Smyslov did not want to bother calculate all of the complications, but white is doing great here. So the line continues. Bishop takes h6 x-clan. obviously we see a little problem, right? What's going on? Bishop takes e5. So GH is bad, right? Queen takes, for example, knight f5, we just take, and knight takes d5. He can't take with the queen because we hit the bishop. All right, so this is just completely winning. So let's go back. So in the bishop takes e5 line, here you got to be extremely accurate with your execution. But be careful. Yeah, some people just jump the gun with bishop takes g7. Is it really checkmate? Because I can take and run away. King f6, yeah. Be careful, guys. You may have a draw, but is it a win? Bishop g5, easy. And how easy is bishop g5? There's a very, very simple and elegant win here. Not bishop takes g7, we already talked about that. Okay, some people are catching up to this. So the first move is actually bishop h7 first. We want to set up bishop g5 to win the queen. Now that's a beautiful move, right? I'm not sure if both players actually saw this far. Much simpler, right? Why even calculate this bishop g5 f6? Very simple. Okay, so if king takes, this is easy, win the queen. King h8. And now we simply grab the bishop. The position is absolutely winning for white. All the threats are still on the table. The rook is now active. Black is just lost. So yeah, I'm not sure if bishop g5 actually works. Probably it doesn't, I'm guessing. I think bishop h7 is a win. Bishop g5 probably doesn't work. But you can double check that. But anyways, that just tells you that you can approach this position from two different angles. The Smyslov positional way and this queen h3, the attacking way. I like queen h3 myself. I tend to like attacking chess a little bit more, but you got to calculate all that, right? One wrong move and none of this works. But I really also love Smyslov's way, especially after you see what happened in the game. Bishop takes, knight to b4, queen g3, bishop h4 tempo, queen f3 takes, and now he plays rook e2, simply stopping knight c2. Once again, we have an interesting situation. Both sides sort of cancel each other out, these d pawns. Black's bishop is now wide open. He's got a bishop pair, but because of symmetrical pawn structure, this monster's knight on e5, and moreover, white's very powerful follow-up idea, which is, so bishop e6 logical development move, is my next question. How would you play as white? Smith already saw all of that, I guarantee you. He saw bishop e6 move. He already saw a plan. He envisioned how he's going to put his pieces. And this is a very strong positional player. You already know where you want to put the pieces, which squares. How many are strong positional players? Yeah, no more attack. Forget about attack. Forget about checkmate now. Yeah, I know you like attacking, guys. But let's try to learn some positional chess. Very nice, Arnav. Okay, yeah, I see some players already catching up to this. Anyone else? I don't like b3. b3, bishop a3 doesn't feel right to me. What if he just plays a5? Okay. Bishop f4 is a decent move. Bishop f4 is not a bad move, but that's not what Smyslov played. Couple guys mentioned the right plan. So the move here is a3. So knight a6 looks kind of ugly. Knight c6 is because you want to trade the e5 knight, but that's what Smyslov planned all along. And now, very important pawn structure to understand too. The knight is coming to c5. This pawn is slightly weak, but not as much as black's damage structure. Also notice how the bishop pair is not very effective here. The bishop on e6 is just a passive piece. Bishop on h4 doesn't do anything. And surprisingly, Ivanchuk, and I don't know, in 1988, he was probably, again, rated like, I want to say in the top 50 with that rating. He just fell apart rather quickly here. So he plays queen c8. Really, I don't like that move. Why would you do that to bring the queen to a6? Okay, he's going for little tactics, right? Bishop g4, queen a6, but I don't like that. Wrong plan altogether. The right plan should have been queen f6. You got to trade queens, neutralize, put pressure on the d pawn, play bishop f5, activate the bishop, and if rook c1, you have this nice rook f e8, another putting pressure on the d4 pawn, and black is doing okay in this endgame. So he played queen c8, which I don't like. I see the idea, of course, bishop g4. Smyslov easily stops it. Bishop e7, bishop f4, queen a6, and now knight c5. And here, guys, let's see how well you played with opposite color bishops. Because he has to take, pawn takes. Now we've got a beautiful outpost on d6. Ivanchuk plays queen b5, double, setting up a little bit of a trap. The trap is rather easy to see. After queen takes c5, queen g3 is the idea, right? Bishop d6, bishop h6. So that's why he gets the king out of there. Yep, you guys got it. Queen g3, bishop f5, bishop d6. And now, together with the e-file, this beautiful outpost on d6, white is doing rather well. So yeah, he is thinking about maybe this d-pawn push, but he played rook g8 for now. And my question is, evaluate this position. What is your move as white? So first, evaluate this position, and what would you play as white? Yeah, we do kind of think that black wants to try the deep one. I agree. Some people already mentioned that. Yeah, it's not super easy to evaluate if you just look at the material and opposite color bishops, because that may probably prompt you to say the position is roughly equal. Yes, somebody already said the key word, the key phrase rather. The opposite color bishops help the attacker. 1.78. I like that you're using the engine eval here. It's definitely not 1.7. It's probably maybe like, if you use engine talk, maybe 0.6 or so, I'm guessing. 0.9, maybe 0.9 if you're using very optimistic engines. But okay, now that we know white is better because the opposite color bishops help the attacker, what's the actual move for white? Okay, Austin is suggesting some really interesting moves. Very nice idea. Yeah, what would you play here as white? And I want to say this is a very natural move, a move that probably the first move that comes into everyone's mind for white. You just need to calculate a few lines. Yeah, we have a few Austins here, yeah. Both Austins are on fire. Couple other people are catching up. Yep, most people are getting the right idea. Rook e7, exclam, that's what Smyslov played. And there's a really cool little tactic in case you guys are into tactics. If bishop e6, Ivanchuk saw that, of course. You can do this kind of tactic. And that's a beautiful attack, right? Rook g7, unstoppable. So he played bishop g6, protecting the f pawn. Of course, he doesn't want to take the b pawn. Rook f7 as a big threat. Now queen c3. White cements his position without allowing any counterplay. The rest is basically one-sided. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you pretty simple technique by Smyslov. The key is do not hurry, improve all your pieces, and then when black is paralyzed, start the counterplay. So queen a4, probably the plan and the idea is to play d4. So Smyslov says, all right, stop the idea. Rook e8. Okay, one pair of rooks may get traded, but that's okay. Bishop d4. Notice how the bishop from d6 now cements himself, protecting everyone and also putting pressure over here. Very powerful piece. Rook b8. Ivanchuk wants to get counterplay, right? He doesn't want to just simply trade the rooks. Rook e3. Another counterplay stop. Rook b3 was the idea. a5. What is White's plan? a5 is a clear indication that Black sort of ran out of ideas. He just wanted to get that pawn out of that a7. How does White make progress? We know that White's better. Okay, interesting idea. Some people are suggesting this very interesting idea. h4, rook g3, h5. That's not what Smyslov played, though. g2, g4 visually looks like you want to checkmate the king by pushing the pawn, but when you suggest a move like g4, it doesn't really have any specific idea in mind. All right, yep, I see some people are catching up to this. Smyslov played, guys, f4. Very natural idea. You basically, everyone sort of zeroed in on this g7 weakness. Some people were suggesting this rook g3 and then pushing the pawn. So you guys are mostly got the right idea, but Smyslov started with this f4 push. So of course, preparing this f5 is really important. Queen d1 check, no big deal. We simply stop all the threats. Queen a4 back. Queen d2. He's not in a hurry to play f5 yet. He's going to regroup a little bit. Rook b3, bishop c3. Notice once again how he stops any activity. And this is the beauty of Smyslov. He makes this game look like he's not even calculating that deeply. He plays by hand, by feel, right? And he just calculates maybe 2 or 3 lines at most. Queen c4. Okay, queen f2, protect your c-pawn. Bishop e4. Okay, active counterplay. Finally, Ivanchuk says, I can't simply allow f5 and lose the game. I'm going to go for active counterplay. And generally speaking, when you are getting outplayed, you want to seek active counterplay. The problem, though, is this is simply losing for Black. For example, he played d4. Finally, he got somewhere. But the problem is queen takes d4. Smyslov just gives up the exchange. Queen takes f7. Queen takes check. King here. And now f5. Look at the domination. Yes, Black won an exchange, but at what cost? Monster bishop, right? 2 extra pawns. This guy is a monster too. The rook is totally out of the game. Again, just visually, we can see the total domination. Plus, nobody said we can't attack the king, especially if we get to this h-pawn, right, guys? He did not play rook takes c3. He played queen d5, but even the endgame is poor. Finally, Black achieved the endgame, but at which cost? Rook e6, the attack still continues, and rook d8, giving up the h-pawn. And this was just losing. I'm going to show you how White converted. He transferred the rook to g4. Black sort of desperately gave up all the pawns, f6. Finally, he took on c3, but the rook and pawn endgame is dead lost. Finally, resign. Wow. One-sided game, and there was no beautiful checkmate in attack. Even you can play IQP this way. So now you've seen 2 diametrically opposite examples how to play with IQP structures. Smyslov actually could have played for the attack, right? That just tells you how rich and powerful those positions are. And don't underestimate the power of IQP. Normally, IQP, like I said, is generally known as bad if you plop the knight in front of it. But things are very, very complicated. Positions are very rich. And you saw how White can use his space, better pieces to create powerful attack, or to trade on d5 at the right moment and establish this beautiful knight on c5 or e5 and dominate positionally. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this lecture and can use the ideas in your own games. And one other thing I want to mention is every single game that I presented to you is available with the click of a button, especially if you have access to chess databases, which everyone has, right? Just such as ChessBase. If you do your due diligence and study the classics, study maybe games that you might not have even looked at, all of these ideas are there. You just need to do the work, right? So if you really love this kind of research, enjoying various structures, ideas, you can use ChessBase, you can use all the statistics. I mean, all of this is very accessible, especially in modern day and age. Back in the day, when I was studying all the famous Russian and Soviet coaches, everyone had to carry, 2 suitcases of chess books, right? And opening notes. But now, with the click of a button, you get access to every single game. Incredible technology. So make sure to take advantage of that.